On her 30th birthday, Ariana thought the least she'd get was a simple, happy birthday from her family. Instead, her parents, Gregory and Evelyn, handed her a pre-packed suitcase and told her to leave. After years of quietly covering bills, sacrificing her own happiness, and holding their lives together, Ariana realized she had never truly been valued, just used. That painful moment marked the beginning of her journey toward freedom and self-worth. As she finally chose to walk away from the people who only saw her as convenient, not as family. If you've ever felt like the backbone of your family, the one holding everything together, only to be cast aside when you were no longer useful, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and follow my journey as I break free from toxic expectations. Stop apologizing for choosing myself, and rebuild a life defined not by obligation, but by peace, purpose, and the kind of love that starts from within. Ariana used to believe that family meant safety, a place to return to, a foundation built on love and unconditional support. Never in her life did she imagine that on her 30th birthday, the only person bringing home a birthday cake would be herself, and what would be waiting for her behind the door wasn't a warm meal or a simple, happy birthday, but a pre-packed suitcase and her father's cold command, "You're too old to freeload. It's time to leave." That afternoon, the sun dipped low behind the aging rooftops of Willow Springs, Ohio. Ariana pulled into the driveway of the house she grew up in, the place filled with memories, both tender and painful. She held a small cake box on the passenger seat. "Happy birthday," scribbled in red icing, slightly smudged. It was the only thing she got for herself because deep down, she already knew Gregory and Evelyn, her parents, had long stopped celebrating her birthday. As she stepped inside, something felt off. The house wasn't quiet, it was sterile. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, washing the room in an unflattering white glare. No one greeted her, no smiles. On the table sat a basic dinner: meatloaf, canned green beans, and instant mashed potatoes. It looked more like a routine Tuesday night than her 30th birthday. "You're late," Gregory barked from the head of the table without looking up. "Worked late, had to finish up a few reports," Ariana replied, placing the cake on the counter. Her voice was calm and controlled. Evelyn didn't say a word, she just pushed her food around with her fork, eyes glued to her plate. Ariana took off her coat, hung it by the door, and sat down. Dinner began in silence, only the clinks of silverware and the occasional throat clearing breaking the heavy tension. No one acknowledged her birthday. "No, thank you, for paying the mortgage. No, we appreciate you, for keeping the lights on." Just silence and chewing. She nudged at the mashed potatoes on her plate, already suspecting something was wrong. And then it came, swift and sharp. Gregory slammed his fork down, the sound startling enough to make Evelyn jump. "You're too old to freeload," he said with cold finality, as if he'd practiced it. Ariana froze. The words hung in the air, almost unreal. She looked at her mother, silently pleading for her to say something, anything, but Evelyn stayed quiet, lips pressed tight, refusing to meet her daughter's eyes. "I pay the internet bill," Ariana said, her voice steady. "The electricity, half the mortgage, groceries." She didn't raise her voice. She wasn't trying to argue, just stating facts. Gregory let out a dry laugh. "Paying a few bills doesn't mean you get to live here forever. Princess," the nickname, once endearing when she was a child with scraped knees, now cut like a knife. Ariana swallowed hard. She understood now. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment outburst, it was planned. They had waited for this day, her birthday, to deliver the final blow. It wasn't a celebration, it was a deadline. She stood up slowly, her plate untouched. No begging, no tears, no dramatic scene, just a quiet nod. "Got it," she said. Gregory smirked, as if he'd won something. Evelyn kept her eyes down, her silence louder than any words. Ariana walked upstairs. Her suitcase was already packed, a cruel touch that made everything clearer. They had meant for her to leave tonight. This wasn't her home anymore. Maybe it never had been. She sat on her bed, the birthday cake now beside her on the nightstand. One candle was missing, probably jostled in the car, but it felt symbolic. One candle missing, one person missing, one family missing. Each memory that had once made this place feel like home now felt like pieces of a lie. Ariana had been the one to patch the leaks, pay the bills, fix the emergencies. She had been the glue, invisible, unthanked, unseen. But not anymore. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her heart didn't shatter, it hardened. That night, Ariana finally understood. She was never really part of this home. She had only ever been useful. And now, they had no more use for her. From that moment forward, she stopped being the daughter who tried to earn love with sacrifices. She became the woman who was ready to start again, not because she had nothing left, but because she finally knew she deserved more. Ariana sat in the room she had called hers for years. But tonight, it felt like nothing more than a hollow space with a suitcase quietly waiting by the bed. The house she once thought of as her sanctuary now felt like a shell, a place that only kept her around when it was convenient. She stared at the small birthday cake sitting on the nightstand. The red icing that once read, "Happy Birthday," had smudged in transit. One candle was missing. No one in the house even knew about the cake, let alone cared. In that moment, Ariana didn't just feel sad. She felt empty, not because she was being kicked out, but because the truth had finally become undeniable. She had never been loved, only used. Her mind began to sort through memories like puzzle pieces she had tried for years to ignore. But now, every forgotten moment, every subtle dismissal, returned with a sharp clarity. What she once told herself was family duty, or they don't know how to show love. She could now see for what it truly was, calculated convenience. She remembered the winter when her father, Gregory, cracked a tooth during one of his drunken episodes. They didn't have the money for the dental surgery. And of course, he didn't even consider taking responsibility for it. Ariana quietly pulled from her savings, money she had been putting aside to finally move out, and paid the bill in full. No thank you, no gratitude, just a grumble when he returned home, numb from anesthesia and still cursing. There was the night Evelyn skidded off an icy road with bald tires and called Ariana in tears. Ariana dropped everything, drove out in the snow to pick her up, and then paid for 4 new tires the following week, using the money she had saved for her one and only vacation that year. Her mother never mentioned it again. Patterns began to surface. Every time someone needed something, a bill paid, a ride, an emergency fix, Ariana was the first call. But when she was hurting, tired, or needed support, there was no one. She had convinced herself it was love, that it was just their way of caring. But now she knew better. She had skipped birthdays, canceled appointments, and worked overtime to make sure the mortgage was paid and the power stayed on, not because she wanted to, but because they needed her. She sacrificed her own peace for theirs, believing that one day they'd see it and appreciate it. But appreciation never came. All that came was silence. Or worse, entitlement. She remembered putting off her own health insurance to pay off Evelyn's credit card debt, staying late at work for just a little extra money to cover the winter heating bill, being told, "It's your responsibility. This is what families do." But Ariana now understood that family didn't mean unconditional giving. It didn't mean draining yourself to hold others together while they ignored your needs. Her memories of home were full of obligation, not affection. The house itself even reflected that: peeling paint, crooked blinds, drafty windows no one had bothered to fix. It wasn't a home. It was a place she kept functional, like a mechanic who works day and night to keep a broken engine running, but never gets to drive. The most painful realization wasn't that they asked her to leave. It was that they didn't even need a reason. They didn't sit her down. They didn't explain. They didn't thank her. They just packed her suitcase and decided she no longer served a purpose. She felt a flicker of anger at herself for not seeing it sooner. But she also felt a strange sense of pride, because at last, she saw the truth. Love doesn't come with conditions. And if you have to pay to belong, it's not love, it's a transaction. That night, as Ariana closed her laptop and made plans to leave for good, something in her lifted. She didn't feel happy, not yet, but the weight of holding everything together wasn't hers anymore. She wasn't the thread stitching a fragile family together. She wasn't their safety net. She wasn't responsible for fixing what they refused to repair. Most importantly, she was no longer the daughter who sacrificed herself in hopes of finally being enough. She saw it now. She had been used, but that didn't define her worth. And starting tomorrow, Ariana would build a life not bound by silent expectations, guilt, or conditional care. She finally understood. Just because you're needed doesn't mean you're loved. And sometimes, walking away is the only way to remember who you really are. As the blue glow of her laptop lit up Ariana's face in the stillness of her room, She knew a chapter of her life was finally closing, not with tears, but with decisive action. For years, she had been the financial backbone of this household, the name on every bill, the fallback plan every time her parents dropped the ball. But tonight, she was taking it all back. She opened her browser. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. The first site she visited was the electric company's portal. The bill had been in her name ever since her father Gregory forgot to pay it one brutal winter 7 years ago, leaving them without heat for 2 days. Ariana had quietly taken over the account after that, making sure it never happened again. Her fingers typed in the password effortlessly. Muscle memory from years of responsibility. The account page loaded, her name, their address, payment history, everything. Each number on the screen was a receipt of the sacrifices she'd made, staying late at work, skipping vacations, delaying her own needs, just to keep the lights on in a house where she wasn't truly wanted. She hovered over the cancel autopay button. Her eyes closed for a moment. Then, with a single click, she confirmed, auto payment disabled. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like relief. Next came the water bill, also in her name, after Evelyn forgot to pay and the taps were shut off right before Thanksgiving 1 year. Ariana logged in, verified her identity, and canceled payment. Then the gas, the internet, even the co-signed loan her parents had begged her to help secure. With every click, a cord tying her to their chaos was being cut. Ariana wasn't just removing herself from responsibility, she was reclaiming her freedom. She was no longer the person who patched things up behind the scenes. No longer the safety net. For the first time in years, she was letting them face the consequences of their own choices. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about anger. It was about boundaries. For too long, her love had been twisted into obligation. And that obligation had been twisted into expectation. She had been drained, emotionally, financially, by people who used the word family as a leash. When she canceled the last account, Ariana closed her laptop. The room was still dark and quiet, but the air felt lighter. The silence no longer screamed guilt. It whispered clarity. She wasn't being cruel, she was choosing herself. In the past, every time she'd felt overwhelmed, Ariana had convinced herself to hold on a little longer. That if she were just more patient, more generous, more forgiving, maybe they'd change. But now she knew, people don't change when they don't have to. And as long as she kept catching them, they'd never learn to stand. The backlash was instant. Her phone lit up with a flurry of messages. The first was from Gregory. Who do you think you are? Turning your back on your family? There was no concern, no confusion, just fury, the kind that comes from losing control. Then Evelyn's voicemail, tearful, pleading. Your father didn't mean what he said. I didn't want it to go this far. Please don't let everyone think badly of us. Ariana listened quietly, but she felt nothing. This wasn't remorse. It was fear of losing their enabler. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her email and began typing a subject line. You asked me to leave, now so has my support. But after staring at the blinking cursor for a moment, she closed the tab. No explanation was needed, not anymore. The next morning, Ariana left town. No letter, no announcement, just a full tank of gas and a quiet goodbye. She had severed the financial ties, and with them, the cycle of silent sacrifice. Most people wouldn't understand, but Ariana finally did. Love doesn't demand that you lose yourself just to belong. And as her car rolled out of the small town that had held her in place for far too long, Ariana knew something with certainty. Her life began the moment she stopped saving people who refused to save themselves. Ariana thought that once she walked away, cutting off financial ties and emotional entanglements, things would finally end. But she underestimated the pride of people who had never seen her as a daughter, only as a convenience. Just a few weeks after she left town, a knock echoed through the modest apartment she'd just rented. A man in a neutral suit handed her a pale yellow envelope with 3 heavy words stamped across it. You've been served. She didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Sitting at her small kitchen table, Ariana slid her finger under the envelope's edge. Inside were legal documents. Gregory and Evelyn were suing her for abandoning elderly parents and causing emotional and financial harm. They were demanding restitution for the support they were no longer receiving. She couldn't tell if she wanted to laugh or cry. For years, Ariana had been the sole thread holding their household together. She paid the power bills, bought the groceries, fixed the car, and covered credit card debt without ever asking for thanks. And now, the moment she stopped playing savior, they turned the law against her. But Ariana wasn't the same girl she used to be. She remembered what her friend Nora had told her when everything first began to fall apart. If they have the nerve to lie about you, then you need to have the strength to tell the truth. Ariana opened the drawer where she'd been storing receipts, bank statements, and printed emails over the years. There it all was, proof of years of financial exploitation masquerading as family duty. The next day, Ariana sat across from an attorney and laid everything out, calmly, clearly, without bitterness. When she finished, the attorney leaned back and said plainly, "Honestly, you should be the one suing for abuse." And so she did. Ariana filed a countersuit against her parents for financial abuse and emotional manipulation. She documented everything: the unpaid debts she covered, the bills in her name, the loans she'd co-signed and repaid herself, and perhaps most damning, the emotional guilt tactics used to keep her tied to a life of servitude under the guise of love. Word spread quickly in their small town. Gregory reacted loudly, shouting in public cafes, painting Ariana as the ungrateful daughter. "After all we sacrificed for her, this is how she repays us." But not everyone believed him. Many had witnessed his rants and bitterness over the years. Now, they were connecting the dots. Evelyn took a different approach, calling Ariana with a trembling voice, "Your father didn't mean to file that lawsuit. This was all a misunderstanding. We can fix this." But Ariana had stopped falling for that tone, the one that once used to make her feel like the villain for choosing herself. She realized it wasn't remorse, it was fear. Eventually, they all met in court. Ariana walked into the hearing room with her head high, her folder of evidence tucked securely in hand. Gregory sat stiffly across the aisle, red-faced and brooding. Evelyn twisted her purse strap like a lifeline. The court clerk read aloud the countersuit. Gregory tried to interrupt, but the judge shut it down quickly. "If you continue this case with knowingly false accusations, you may face defamation charges, and financial abuse is a very real, provable offense." Ariana said nothing. She didn't have to. Her silence now carried more weight than years of unspoken pain. The girl who used to hold everything together was finally allowing things to fall, so they could be rebuilt without her as a crutch. As the hearing adjourned, Ariana watched her parents shuffle out, smaller, quieter, diminished. She sat in her car, hands on the steering wheel, looking at them through the rearview mirror. These were the people who once held absolute power over her. And now, they looked like strangers. On the drive back, she rolled the window down, letting the crisp autumn air rush in like a reset. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from guilt or drowning in obligation. She was simply free. Facing betrayal from the people who raised you is one of the deepest wounds a person can carry. But in that wound, Ariana found her strength. She realized something crucial. Staying silent doesn't prove loyalty, it only extends injustice. And she would no longer stay silent. After the court hearing, as Ariana drove out of the courthouse parking lot, she felt as though she had just crossed an invisible line. No more threatening texts, no more late-night voicemails filled with blame or guilt. Only the cool autumn wind slipping in through the open window and the long stretch of road ahead. Ariana didn't know exactly where she was going, but for the first time in her life, that uncertainty didn't scare her. She wasn't running anymore, she was choosing. Her new apartment sat on the edge of a quiet town where no one knew her name. The hardwood floors creaked, the walls were faded, and the kitchen barely fit one person, but to Ariana, it was a sanctuary. She painted the walls a soft sky blue, the color of open air and unburdened breath. In the evenings, she would sit by the only window in her living room, watching the town lights blink like distant stars. She no longer thought about unpaid bills, harsh words, or the hollow way being called ungrateful used to feel. In the silence of this new place, she found something unexpected: peace. Ariana spent the first few days tidying, planting flowers in small pots, and enrolling in a local art class. She had always wanted to learn how to draw, but for years was told, "Don't waste your time," or, "How will that pay the bills?" Now, she held a pencil with hands more familiar with bills and spreadsheets, trembling, but free. Nora, her only true friend, would visit on weekends. They'd cook, watch old movies, and laugh over memories that once used to make Ariana cry. One night, as they sat on the couch eating cold spaghetti, Nora raised her fork and smiled. To survival, she said. Ariana returned the smile with quiet strength. And to never apologizing for saving yourself. Though her new life was slowly settling, old memories still crept in, especially at night. Sometimes, she'd dream of the old kitchen, the clinking of dishes in silence, Evelyn's downcast eyes, Gregory's mocking laugh as he called her Princess Freeloader. She'd wake up in a sweat, her chest tight, but then she'd remind herself, they're not here. I left. I saved myself. Gregory continued to smear her online. An old friend sent her one of his posts. Our daughter turned her back on us, abandoned her family when we needed her most. But this time, Ariana didn't cry. She didn't delete her account or hide. Instead, she reached for her file folder, stacked with receipts, bank transfers, and years of truth, and she told her side. She posted a simple message. I didn't lose a family. I walked away from people who believed love was measured in sacrifice and silence. When they told me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter, they lost the person who kept the lights on when they weren't looking. The response was overwhelming. Messages, comments, emails from strangers who had lived through similar pain. One woman wrote, "Your story is everything I've never had the courage to say. Thank you." Ariana realized that her courage had not only saved her, it had lit a path for others. 2. One Saturday, while unpacking the last of her moving boxes, Ariana found a small, dusty plastic container at the bottom. Inside was a cheap birthday cake topper, the one she'd bought for herself on her 30th birthday. She laughed, softly but deeply. She placed it on a shelf, not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise. From now on, every birthday belongs to me, and no one can take that away again. She didn't forgive completely, but she learned to let go. Forgiveness didn't mean letting them back in. It meant freeing herself from the poison of anger they left behind. Ariana began writing a new chapter of her life, on blank pages no longer stained by guilt or obligation. And with each small step, each quiet morning, she understood something she'd never dared to believe before. Sometimes, walking away from the people who raised you is the only way to truly love yourself. Ariana's story didn't begin with defiance. It began with love, a quiet, steady, misdirected love. For years, she believed that family meant endurance, sacrifice, and silence. She paid the bills, worked overtime, gave up her dreams, just to keep the house from collapsing. But the same house that she held together was the one that cast her out. On her 30th birthday, no greeting, no gratitude, just a packed suitcase and a cold line. You're too old to freeload. With that single moment, they cut the cord she thought was unconditional love. In the days that followed, as her life unraveled, Ariana tried to make sense of it all. How could the people I love treat me like this? She spiraled in guilt, questioning whether she had failed as a daughter, as a woman, or as a person. But over time, truth emerged from the rubble. She wasn't wrong for loving them, she was wrong for believing that love meant losing herself. Not every relationship deserves to be kept. Not everyone who shares your blood deserves a place in your life forever. When Gregory and Evelyn painted Ariana as the traitor, she didn't retaliate with venom. She answered with truth, clear, documented, lived truth, and that truth awakened something in others. One comment beneath her post read, "I used to feel selfish for walking away from my parents. But now I get it. No one has the right to weaponize family to trap you forever." Ariana realized, by speaking up, she wasn't just saving herself, she was creating space for others to do the same. She became a voice for those labeled ungrateful, for the daughters and sons blamed for abandoning their families just because they chose health over harm. One afternoon, as she sat by her window, she remembered something Nora once said, "Family isn't supposed to make you feel small. It should be where you feel most like yourself, safe, loved." Ariana finally believed that. Gregory and Evelyn never changed. They stayed in their version of the story, where they were victims and Ariana was disloyal. But their narrative no longer had power over her. She understood now. Healing doesn't always come from the apology you wait for, it comes when you stop waiting for it. Ariana wrote the final lines of her story as a message to anyone who's ever felt like a stranger in their own family. Blood doesn't make a family. Respect, trust, and kindness do. If someone uses your bloodline to make you stay silent, to endure, or to sacrifice your own well-being, walking away isn't betrayal. It's self-love. Her post quickly spread, People shared, commented, reached out. A young woman wrote, "I've spent my whole childhood afraid to leave a violent home because I thought I wasn't allowed. Your story gave me hope that I deserve better." A single father message, "I never understood why my daughter became distant. After reading your story, I started looking at my own behavior." Ariana never imagined her pain could serve a greater purpose, but now she understood. Sometimes it's through the cracks that a stronger life is built, one rooted in truth, not duty. One night while cleaning, Ariana found an old photo frame. Inside was a picture of her as a child, eyes wide, smiling in front of a small birthday cake. She looked into those eyes and smiled. She had broken the cycle. She had chosen a different ending. And that ending, lonely, difficult, imperfect, was also the path that led her back to herself.